August 23, 1944. A phone rings in a bunker deep beneath the forests of East Prussia. Adolf Hitler picks it up and screams into the receiver, his voice trembling with fury. The question he asks will echo through history. Is Paris burning? On the other end of that line stands General Dietrich von Choltitz, the man Hitler trusted to turn the City of Light into a field of ruins. But in the next 48 hours, this loyal German officer will make a decision that defies everything he's been trained to do. The question is, why? To understand what happened in those final days of August 1944, you need to understand who Dietrich von Choltitz really was. This wasn't some reluctant soldier with secret moral objections to the Nazi regime. Born on November 9, 1894, into an aristocratic Prussian family, Choltitz was military royalty. His father served as a major in the Prussian army. For young Dietrich, there was never a question about what he would become. He was born to be a soldier. When World War I erupted, Choltitz joined the Royal Saxon Army as a young officer. He fought at the First Battle of the Marne, where 2 million men clashed in a battle that would define a generation. He was there at the Somme, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. Choltitz earned his promotions the hard way, through courage under fire and unwavering discipline. By the end of the war, he had achieved the rank of lieutenant, and more importantly, he had discovered his purpose. He was a professional soldier, nothing more, nothing less. When the Weimar Republic rose from the ashes of Imperial Germany, Choltitz stayed in the military. He served in the Reichswehr through the turbulent 1920s and 30s, watching as his country descended into economic chaos and political extremism. When the Nazis came to power, Choltitz didn't join out of ideological passion. He was a career officer, and the military was his life. Politics was for politicians. His job was to follow orders, and follow orders he did. When World War II began in September 1939, Choltitz was ready. He played a significant role in the invasion of Poland, executing his duties with the precision and efficiency expected of a Prussian officer. But it was in May 1940, during the Battle of Rotterdam, that Choltitz truly made his mark. The fighting was intense, brutal, and devastating. Under Choltitz's leadership, German forces overwhelmed Dutch resistance. The cost to Rotterdam's civilian population and infrastructure was catastrophic. For his actions, Choltitz received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. He was becoming known throughout the Wehrmacht as a man who got results, no matter the cost. As the war turned against Germany, Choltitz continued to rise through the ranks. On August 1, 1944, he was promoted to General der Infanterie. Just 6 days later, Hitler personally appointed him military governor of Paris. It was an honor. It was also a death sentence. The Paris that Choltitz arrived in on August 9, 1944, was not the Paris of German victory parades from 4 years earlier. The city was tense, angry, ready to explode. The French resistance had been growing stronger for months, and the German garrison was stretched thin. Choltitz had roughly 20,000 troops under his command, but most of them were rear echelon personnel, clerks, administrators, soldiers who had enjoyed 4 comfortable years of occupation duty. They were soft, undisciplined, and completely unprepared to fight a professional army. On August 19, the inevitable happened. The French resistance launched a major uprising. Barricades appeared in the streets overnight. German vehicles were ambushed. Communication lines were cut. Within hours, key public buildings had fallen into resistance hands. The Germans were losing control, and everyone knew it. The Allied forces, fresh from their triumph on D-Day, were racing toward the French capital. General Georges Patton's Third Army and General Jacques-Philippe Leclerc's 2nd French Armored Division were closing in fast. Choltitz stood in his office at the Hotel Meurice, looking out over the Tuileries Gardens. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. The Satan sparkled in the sunlight. The golden dome of Les Invalides gleamed against the blue sky. 800 years of human civilization spread out before him, and in his hand he held a cable from Adolf Hitler. The order was explicit, impossible to misunderstand. Paris must not pass into the enemy's hands, except as a field of ruins. Here's where the story gets complicated, where history blurs into myth and we're left wondering what really happened. According to Choltitz's own memoir, published years after the war, he was horrified by Hitler's order. He writes about looking at Notre Dame, the Louvre, the Arc de Triomphe, and realizing he couldn't destroy something so magnificent. He describes Hitler as insane, detached from reality, giving orders that served no military purpose. In Choltitz's telling, he was a man of conscience who chose to disobey his Führer to save Paris. But there's another version of this story, one that's darker and more cynical. What if Choltitz knew he couldn't hold Paris even if he wanted to? What if he saw the writing on the wall and decided that surrendering the city intact was his best chance at survival. Think about his situation. His garrison was demoralized and outnumbered. The resistance controlled large sections of the city. Allied armies were hours away. Even if he gave the order to detonate explosives planted throughout Paris, would his troops obey, or would they refuse, knowing the war was already lost? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. On August 20th, with assistance from Raoul Nordling, the Swedish consul general in Paris, Choltitz negotiated a ceasefire with the resistance. It didn't hold. Too many resistance groups refused to acknowledge it, and fighting erupted again the next day. The city was sliding toward chaos, and Choltitz was running out of time. On the morning of August 25th, Leclerc's division entered Paris in force. The French population erupted in celebration. Resistance fighters emerged from hiding to join the regular troops. German soldiers, seeing that the situation was hopeless, began surrendering en masse. At the Hotel Meurice, Choltitz received word that French forces were approaching his headquarters. He could have ordered his men to fight to the last bullet. He could have detonated the explosives planted throughout the city. Instead, he stood calmly at his desk when French Lieutenant Henri Carcher burst into his office. "I am Lieutenant Henri Carcher, of the army of General de Gaulle," the young officer announced. Choltitz looked at him for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "I am General von Choltitz, commander of Gross Paris. You are my prisoner." It was over. Paris had fallen, and it was completely intact. Not a single bridge demolished, not a single monument destroyed. The explosives planted throughout the city remained undetonated. Whether through moral conviction, pragmatic calculation, or simple military necessity, Choltitz had defied Hitler's order to turn Paris into rubble. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. After the war, British intelligence released secret recordings made at Trent Park, where high-ranking German officers were held as prisoners. These recordings captured private conversations that the Germans thought were confidential. On August 29, 1944, just days after Paris fell, Choltitz was recorded saying something chilling. "The worst job I ever carried out, which however I carried out with great consistency, was the liquidation of the Jews. I carried out this mission thoroughly and entirely." So who was the real Dietrich von Choltitz? Was he the savior of Paris, the man of conscience who defied Hitler to preserve Western civilization? Or was he a war criminal who simply made the smart tactical choice when surrender became inevitable, then crafted a heroic narrative to rehabilitate his reputation? Some historians, like Lionel Dardenne from the Museum of the Order of Liberation, are skeptical of Choltitz's hero status. "He portrays himself as the savior of the city," Dardenne says, "but the truth is he couldn't have destroyed it. The military reality was simple. Choltitz didn't have the troops, the equipment, or the time to execute Hitler's demolition orders. The resistance had seized too much of the city. Allied forces were too close. Any attempt to destroy Paris would have been interrupted before it could be completed." Others argue that Choltitz deserves credit regardless of his motivations. After all, he did have explosives planted throughout the city. 3 tons in Notre Dame Cathedral, 2 tons in Les Invalides. Charges set on every major bridge across the Seine. Even if he couldn't destroy the entire city, he could have inflicted catastrophic damage. He chose not to. Does it matter whether that choice came from moral conviction or practical calculation? The result was the same. Paris survived. After his surrender, Choltitz spent 3 years in Allied captivity, first at Trent Park in London, then at Camp Clinton in Mississippi. He was never formally charged with war crimes, though the recordings from Trent Park revealed his complicity in atrocities against Jews. In 1947, he was released and allowed to return to Germany. In 1956, in a move that shocked many, he returned to Paris. When he walked into the Hotel Meurice, the staff recognized him immediately. They treated him with a strange mixture of respect and wariness, remembering him as the German general who had occupied their city but ultimately spared it from destruction. Choltitz died on November 5, 1966 in Baden-Baden, suffering from pulmonary emphysema related to his wartime service. His funeral was attended by high-ranking French military officers who were stationed in Baden-Baden at the time, a gesture that speaks to the complexity of his legacy. His son, Timo, spent years promoting the narrative of his father as Paris's savior, insisting that his actions in those final days of August 1944 deserved recognition and gratitude. But should we be grateful? That's the question that historians still debate. Choltitz himself seemed to struggle with his own legacy. In those secretly recorded conversations at Trent Park, he said something revealing. "We all share the guilt. We went along with everything, and we half took the Nazis seriously. Instead of saying to hell with you and your stupid nonsense, I misled my soldiers into believing this rubbish. I feel utterly ashamed of myself. Perhaps we bear even more guilt than these uneducated animals." These words reveal a man grappling with his conscience, trying to reconcile the soldier he wanted to be with the crimes he participated in. Can a single act of disobedience, assuming it even was an act of moral courage, outweigh years of loyal service to a brutal regime? Can we separate the man who saved Paris from the man who admitted to participating in the liquidation of Jews? History rarely gives us clear answers to these questions. The story of Paris in August 1944 has been told and retold in films, books, and endless historical debates. The 1965 book and subsequent film Is Paris Burning popularized the romantic version of events, portraying Choltitz as a principled officer who defied Hitler out of deep appreciation for Paris's cultural significance. It's a compelling narrative, the story of a soldier finding his conscience at the last possible moment, but it may also be a myth, carefully constructed to hide more complicated and darker truths. What we know for certain is this: Paris survived World War II largely intact. While London and Berlin were reduced to rubble by years of bombing, Paris emerged with its monuments, bridges, and architecture preserved. Whether Choltitz deserves credit for that preservation remains one of the great debates of World War II history. Was he a hero who chose conscience over duty, a pragmatist who made the smart tactical choice, or a war criminal who invented a convenient story to escape justice? Perhaps the most honest answer is that he was all of these things at once. Human beings are complicated, especially in times of war when the pressure to follow orders conflicts with basic moral decency. Choltitz was a product of his culture, his upbringing, and his times. He was trained from childhood to obey, to serve, to never question orders from superior officers. For most of his career, he did exactly that, even when those orders involved atrocities. But in Paris, for reasons we may never fully understand, he didn't. Whether that makes him a hero is for each of us to decide. The line between hero and villain is often thinner than we'd like to believe. History isn't written in black and white, it's written in shades of grey, in the complex motivations of flawed human beings making impossible choices under extraordinary pressure. Dietrich von Choltitz embodied that complexity. He was capable of both great mercy and great cruelty. He saved a city and participated in genocide. He defied Hitler and served him faithfully for years. These contradictions don't cancel each other out. They exist simultaneously, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, about what ordinary people are capable of in extraordinary circumstances. So, as you think about this story, consider these questions. If Choltitz had destroyed Paris as ordered, would he be remembered as a monster? If he genuinely spared the city out of moral conviction, does that redeem his earlier crimes? And perhaps most importantly, when faced with an impossible choice between duty and conscience, what would you do? These aren't easy questions, and they don't have simple answers, but they're worth asking, because understanding the past isn't about finding heroes and villains. It's about understanding the complexity of human choices and the weight of consequences that echo through generations. Thank you for watching this exploration of one of World War II's most complicated figures. The story of Dietrich von Choltitz and Paris in 1944 continues to spark debate among historians, and now we'd love to hear your perspective. Do you believe Choltitz was genuinely motivated by conscience, or was he simply making the pragmatic choice? Can a single moral act redeem a lifetime of complicity in atrocities? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into history compelling, you might also be interested in our video examining other morally complex figures from World War II. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the complicated truths that history has to teach us.